any kind of film that you want to make.
Yeah.
You just have to have an infrastructure to support it. So the Surreal 16 is starting their own film festival that appeals to people who like those sorts of things, and there are enough people to come to the
Oh,
festival.
certainly. Yeah.
So I think that's what excites me about the state of the industry now, that it's gotten big enough that it can support people making, all kinds of films. So there's the grassroots level films that I still like, but I also really love the people who are making the art film. And I think Kenneth Young is kind of bridging kind of the art film and the
The
popular
popular.
film.
Yeah.
So I think he's really
Yeah.
important. I mean, Kunle Afolayan in some
Yeah.
ways started out the same way,
Oh,
right? The
yes.
figurine was something
Was
very,
something very,
very new and has now become, such a
yeah.
big,
I mean, I think, I mean, he's doing a very wonderful job.
yeah.
But the plan is, and hopefully, I probably will be able to visit his film village before I
Mm-hmm.
return to the
Mm-hmm.
US.
There's actually, so I get his newsletter. I think there's something happening tomorrow. But I think it's a play at Cat Pub or
Okay,
something.
yeah,
So if
that's
you
his,
wanted to go to that,
to go
that's
to.
something I was thinking about
Okay.
doing on Sunday
I mean,
afternoon.
Cap Herb is in Ibadan area or something like that. I'm not.
No, there's
Is it
something
in
in
Lagos?
Lagos.
Oh,
I'll
really?
show it after our interview. I can show
Okay,
it.
then. I mean, yeah,
I think
uh,
it's a play or
a play.
something.
Okay, that'll be really,
Yeah.
that'll be really wonderful. That'll be really wonderful. Well, again, I mean,
Did you have more questions? I mean,
yeah,
what is it, 12:45? We might as
12:45.
well go ahead and finish up whatever you want to ask.
Okay, yeah. I think again, one thing I want to ask again, I'm going to return to the theme of
Mm-hmm.
women,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the production, in terms of their role. I mean, I know, which is kind of interesting. I know that there's some very brilliant filmmakers in the north that are
Mm-hmm.
women in Nollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that started with NTA.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in NTA, I trained. When I got to NTA to do my youth service, the person who actually brought me up, who trained me as a
Mm-hmm.
producer, a director, and was a woman,
Mm-hmm.
Zana Beatrice,
Mm-hmm.
who won so many awards in all those NTA festivals. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
NTA was really, really vibrant then.
Mm-hmm.
There was this whatever fest or different kind of competitions among NTA stars, and so um, and I think again there's a way in which that is replicated in the industry. So can you talk briefly about women in Kannywood, whether producers at least that you've worked with
Yeah.
or that you've seen
There,
their
there,
work?
there, there. I have done interviews a long time ago with there were various women producers,
Okay.
um, associations,
Hmm.
and there was something they called kantawai, which
Okay.
would be when a woman was trying to produce a film, and then kind of the men would take advantage of her because she didn't know the background as much, so they would tell her this costs more, they wouldn't respect her or something.
Hmm.
Um, Balaraba Ramat Yakubo is an author. She was also she produced some of her early films were made into her early novels were made into films. She recently made a film but she hasn't been able to get distribution for it with the Project Act Nollywood.
Hmm.
So I think she turned it into a series. But she has not really been able to break into this new kind of way of doing things. I know Rahama Sadao has gotten quite powerful. It's funny because she was the center of the scandal in 2016 when she shot the music video with Classique, this Christian. The song wasn't Christian, but he's like a Christian from the north. So he's not really a part of Kannywood. So when they banned her, it hurt her, but it didn't hurt him. And basically, they hugged each other and held hands in the music video, and that got her banned from the industry because there are rules in Kannywood against men and women touching. But I mean, she was also then acting in Nollywood. Actually, she was acting in Sons of the Caliphate
Mhm.
that Kenneth Young was
Yeah. Okay.
directing,
Yeah.
and so she had Nollywood connections, and so she started acting a lot of Nollywood films. And I think she's just made a lot of money, and she's now producing House of Films. And what can you say? She's quite powerful, even though she was originally banned. So. Um, again, I have not been living in Kano
Right.
for 12 or 13 years.
Hmm.
So I can't speak as much to the most recent
Yeah.
things that are happening. I do know Rahama Sadao has gotten quite big.
Hmm.
There have been other women who were quite important who have since passed away that I knew, but I'm afraid that that's not something I can speak to quite as
Yeah.
authoritatively.
One of the, I mean, like, let's talk about the recurrent themes in some
Mm-hmm.
of the, do you
Yeah.
think, I mean, because again, there are certain themes associated with different parts, with Yoruba, in terms of what do
Mm-hmm.
you think are the recurrent themes? Again, I'm speaking, for, as someone who in those days we used to produce this outside drama when I was in
Mm-hmm.
NTA Maiduguri,
Mm.
or I mean, that was quite a long time ago. I was talking about
Again,
87,
I
88.
need I need to interview you. You have a lot of knowledge that I don't.
uh,
Yeah.
87, 88, and so,
Mm-hmm.
and then the protocols,
Mm-hmm.
when a woman serves her husband,
Mm-hmm.
the certain
Mm.
ways in which she has to behave.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's certain, there's a lot of, like, just like the touching of hands that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things. I know then that the GM of my station would get a call
Mm.
about how the play mimicked reality so much that someone would say, "Oh, who told them about my story?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why
Mm-hmm.
are they talking about me?" So, and
Mm-hmm.
then we would, so in other words, so what would you say in terms of reality and its representation in can you compare that again? It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be about something that's going on a bit from your studies.
Yeah, I mean, I write about what I call the politics of exposure. So, yeah, I think sometimes filmmakers would make films about what's going on in society, and
Hmm.
so sometimes those would be about things that are not good. So,
Yeah.
Balaraba Ramat Yakubu, again, she's a novelist, but the things that she's writing about she's told me in interviews, she hears people talking, people have told her stories, and so when she writes novels, I mean, some of them are based on her own experiences, right? I think so, like, she's writing just about the society and what she's observing, and so then that gets translated into film as well. The same thing, Hamen Dabino, one of the best-selling Hausa novelists, also a producer director. He's currently a very big uh, TV series star, such that he's had to tint his glasses so that people don't see him when he's driving.
Huh.
But when he started writing, he had been poor. He was in love with a rich girl. Her parents forced her to marry someone else.
Huh.
And so when he wrote his one of his most successful novels, he basically tells his own story, but like he gets the girl in the end, right? So a lot of some of the early authors were kind of just telling stories that had happened to them or stories that they knew about in society. So some of those themes of kind of star-crossed lovers and so on were not just Mills and Boone
Mhm.
romance novels. That was actually because a lot of young people were writing about what was important to them and what had happened to them. So um, obviously, it's a bit dangerous to look at any novel or film and say this is true
Oh,
life story, right?
certainly, yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
even
it's
even
reality
even
that, yeah,
authors who do
that
like
has been
admit to
embellished.
using their own stories don't want you to think that every single detail in the story is true. It's fiction. um, but yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of the House of films and a lot of the House of novels are they're they're depicting life as it is observed by the artist. There may be some exaggeration, there may be, there's fiction, it's all fiction. But definitely, so in when I write about the politics of exposure,
Hmm.
sometimes those things that you to have a, especially I think in Hausa society, it's like karakatona asiri, don't reveal the secrets. And
Mhm.
in fact, in Islam, you're not supposed to show sinfulness lest you call, you shouldn't tell somebody about your sin lest you cause someone else to sin, right? So there are concerns that if you're showing bad behavior on screen, or you're not dressing properly or something, then that's going to cause other people to sin. And so that's in part what has caused a lot of controversy, because
Mhm.
filmmakers will be like, we're just showing what's happening. If this man is
Exactly.
abusive to his wife,
Yeah.
we're showing that. If there's some really scandalous Hausa films actually. Or if this politician is being corrupt, we're
Mhm.
showing that. And so the argument against keep it all under wraps is that we're actually educating society by showing everybody knows these things happen. We're just talking about it openly, and in kind of exposing these things, then it allows us to kind of confront it. So even before, I think now, this was even before I was writing about this before Twitter and TikTok and all these things. I think now with social media, where everyone is,
Mhm.
has a phone, is making things, it's even harder than for things to be censored. But I think that was my. I mean, that's not the only thing that's being made, but that was part of what I was interested in the way that stories are being told about things that are happening in society. There's some people who don't want those stories to be told,
Yeah.
but they're going on, and so filmmakers will say this is we're just exposing things that are happening, or we're writing about stories that we've been told or things that we've seen. um,
Yeah. I mean, there's always that tension between, you know, the representation of reality.
mm,
I mean, in literature,
mm-hmm,
in movies, and and then the way what I would call, I mean, those who control,
mm-hmm,
the narrative
mm-hmm,
in society, the way they react to it. But then, I mean, again, which raises, perennial question in the arts, in arts and
mm-hmm,
reality. How do you eat or make an omelette without breaking the egg?
yeah,
How do you comment about certain things that
mm-hmm,
are not desirable, that you wish, would stop,
yeah,
without really showing that those behaviors?
yeah,
So
yeah,
what is enough, and what is
mm-hmm.
just, barely enough to be able to do that? And there's this tension. But would you think that the tension is more in Kannywood than
Than
in
in
Nollywood in the
Nollywood.
South?
I mean, I know Kannywood better than Nollywood, so I
Yeah.
know there was a lot of controversy about
Yeah.
what was it, the Lagos um, gangs of Lagos,
Okay.
when they
Oh,
showed the
yeah.
masquerades
Yeah.
opening fire.
Yeah.
People were very angry about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that there have been those controversies in Nollywood too.
Yeah.
I think generally because Hausa society, Northern society, is
Mm.
a bit more conservative.
Yeah.
There's just more of it, right? So
Yeah.
that it's not that there's never
Yeah. It's
controversy
not
in the
very
South,
current.
but
Yeah.
like there's just, and I think the most powerful people in society
Yeah.
um, are more
The moral
conservative, and so
entrepreneurs. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
they well, I mean, in 2008, I think there was the emir, the governor, and the head of Adede Tasahu, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a societal reorientation directorate that had been created by Shekarau, the governor, the as part of Sharia kind of. They were like burning books and films. So they went to a girls' school, like called them all to assembly, went rifling through their belongings, found all the Hausa novels, burned them, and then replaced them with the acceptable things that had been published by Adede Tasahu. So I think the those were the authorities
Yeah.
there, right? And they were doing that sort of thing. And even ordinary people
Yeah.
are just a bit suspicious of filmmakers and that sort of thing. So I think it's not that there aren't tensions elsewhere, but
Yeah.
that it's just maybe heightened by the conservativeness of the society.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, there's always tension between. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
controversy about the gangs of Lagos,
Mm-hmm.
for me, was because, again, at least, the intent was to
Mm-hmm.
see how deceptive behavior, which is kind of very common in arts,
Mm-hmm.
kind of surreptitiously, pretending not to be, in order to,
Mm-hmm.
to get those people, kind of undercover stuff to get
Mm-hmm.
them. What I would say, I would not read
Mm-hmm.
what happened in the movie as an attempt to insult the culture.
No,
I
it's
mean, because
fiction.
yeah,
Yeah.
because the your
It's
festival
showing
is
the
a very,
hypocrisy of the
yeah,
politicians.
because
And
your
yeah.
festival is a very good one. I mean, it's what Lagos is
Mm-hmm.
associated with. is, again, it's particularly represents, and I think it's a very good thing. But then those people could have adopted, even, the way they did that, they could have adapted, the role of a monk dress to do the same thing. So I don't think it was an intention to insult,
No,
but again,
it was part
like
of
you
the
rightly said,
story.
yeah,
I mean, it's the same thing. So
yeah,
in Kano,
yeah,
it can be quite controversial to
yeah,
critique a religious figure,
yeah.
right? But then part of what they're trying to expose is
It's a
that
certain religious figures, yeah,
there's a lot of hypocrisy
yeah,
in society, and
yeah,
so I mean, I have seen films where like an imam
mm,
is doing bad things, and
yeah,
those
yeah,
there was one that was very an early film.
mm,
What was the name of it? And there were several early films that Abdallah Uba Adamo has
mm,
written about. One got a fatwa
mm,
put on it by religious leaders because they showed this girl who was wearing hijab,
mm,
and everybody thought she was very virtuous because of the hijab, but in fact she was out sleeping with everyone, right? So
mm,
they were like, oh, you're bringing shame to like virtuous Hausa
yeah,
women by showing that. And there was
mm,
another one, I think Karakata,
mm,
Malam Karakata, who again was supposed to be like a religious teacher, a malam, and he's actually I think he creates the the Ubutun Shah, like people will go to him
mm.
um, for solutions and things, and so he's like sleeping with women. And so that was also very controversial because they're showing a malam, they're showing a religious
In a
figure
very ridiculous way.
doing, being a hypocrite.
Yeah.
So I think Kannywood does a lot of that. It kind of reveals the hypocrisy of socially acceptable figures. So you can imagine social, the figures who are in power
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yeah.
ridiculed or shamed in
Mm-hmm.
that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of the controversy. The people in authority are being shown in a bad light, and
Sure.
they don't want that. So
Yeah. Again, this is, historically, Plato,
mm,
in Greece,
mm-hmm,
complained about the same thing.
mm.
This is what he said about, that because
Yeah,
artists, they portray kings as
yeah,
drunkards, and
yeah.
because of that, it would ban poets in its republic.
So you're trying to
Yeah.
keep. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like I mean, Hausa ideals are very similar to Plato, right?
So
You
Plato.
you show a good image
Yeah.
of. I mean, that's what the presidents have talked about in rebranding too,
Yeah.
right? You show a good image of Nigeria. You have the KLM
Yeah.
announced biggest film industry in the world,
Yeah.
but yeah, like show a good image, show something that people. But the filmmakers are like, we're just showing what's going on,
Yeah.
and so there's that tension between the artists who are actually portraying what's
Okay.
happening and the government authorities who want to have a kind of nice picture of everything, so that everybody can
Everybody, yeah. And I think,
the
again, that
rebranding thing.
that leads to this, this question of, the audience too, because I guess the danger is this: those moral entrepreneurs who are
Mm,
very powerful, controls the narrative. Basically, what they're, that the ordinary person might not understand that this is a satire, this is something
mm,
that's kind of, so that they would just accept it.
yeah,
Because, again, there's this danger. Dangerous, but then it happens. Anywhere,
hmm,
everywhere, that the ordinary person, their knowledge is almost always
mm,
underestimated.
yeah,
That, they see this as the ideal, which is kind of ironic, because the audience,
yeah.
what I found out in my research, and then, is that the audience are much more sophisticated than people think.
I think so.
You
Yeah.
see the old woman who is saying, why is it just, why can't you show the face of the other person talking?
Hmm.
From the directing point of view,
Yeah.
she's making a point. So,
I mean, I think that there's very film literate audiences all over Nigeria. So I think, I mean, maybe you could say that if someone were first being introduced to film, they never seen a film before. But
yeah,
now, so many people have seen film, and I think audiences are quite sophisticated. I mean,
they're very,
I understand concerns about, you know, the way that young children can be influenced by things, and there's probably something to that.
yeah,
But that's why you have rating. I mean, there are other ways other than banning things
them banning
to
things. Yeah.
control what young children see. I mean, it's interesting in Kano. It's often women and children, right? The vulnerable
Yeah,
audiences. So women
yeah,
are kind of classified
yeah.
as children
As children, I mean, again,
in
that's the
Hollywood.
classic,
Yeah, but again, I mean,
which is
like
not
with social
true.
media now,
Yeah,
there's much worse stuff that you can find
you
on
can
the
find,
internet than,
and it's very
in
difficult to
fact,
control them.
filmmakers have said we're doing House of Society a favor because our productions are much cleaner than anything else you're going
Anything
to
else?
find. So you should actually be thanking us because we're making productions that are generally, even if they show bad things, there's some sort of
To
moral,
condemn that,
yeah,
yes,
there's some sort of
morality to it,
closure
yeah.
at the end that the people who engage in this bad stuff end up,
They suffer, yes,
not in all of them, right? And
yeah.
and maybe in some of the more sophisticated ones there's more open endings, but generally House of Films are very, very clean if you're wanting something that's not going to be too influential. Much more so than like online porn that you can find.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, now, and Zainab Ango, who's also at LSA right now,
Hmm.
she's written about kind of some of the digital, especially in writing now, people can publish anonymously on blogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's a proliferation of also pornography because
Hmm.
nobody knows their names. And
Hmm.
so people are freed from kind of the
Which is
constraints
really
of
bad, yeah.
like from self censorship and, from even your friends and family saying something, let alone government censorship. So I think it's very difficult to control. If you're willing to be anonymous, it's very difficult to control that sort of thing now with social media. If you want to make money, I mean, like on YouTube now, the
Yeah.
censors board can control people because you have to be, have a registered production company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to make the money on YouTube, then you have to, they can find you. They
Yeah.
can find your office.
So, I mean, again, finally, what would your assessment, what would you say in terms of, do you think, I mean, would you say, again, given what is happening in the current situation
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, artistically, technically, even content wise, that there's an improvement in your assessment of, Kannywood? Do you think
I
it's better
mean,
than what it used to
I
be?
think, as an industry matures, I think it gets better. At the same time, I think there have always been really good stories.
Yeah.
Definitely, like the cinematography, like the kind of technical aspects
Yeah.
are, with the kind of the cheapness of digital technology now, it's much easier to make things that look really good. I definitely think some of the television shows have now they're appealing to larger audiences than they ever did before. Like last year when I was in Kano, the people working at the BUK guest house, like whenever those TV shows were on, they were glued to them. Whereas before they wouldn't have admitted that they watched House of Film. They would say, "Oh, we watch the comedies because that's something men can watch," but they would kind of associate the dramas with women. But there's the stories now told in the serials are very popular. So one thing I kind of mourn is singing and dancing has been such a big part of the House of Film industry that's kind of being phased out. In part, I think because people are criticizing them. They're like, "Oh, this isn't our culture. This isn't aesthetically whatever." But I think I love the singing and dancing. I think it adds a lot to the narratives.
Mm-hmm.
You can embed a lot of emotion and a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
They're kind of like poems in the middle of the story. And so I do kind of mourn the loss of those. There's not nearly as much singing and dancing now. And so personally, I loved that. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's a mature industry and it has grown. Um, so yeah, I, I do like some of the old stuff too. Though,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, again, I think I love singing and dancing too. I mean, there are some people who vicariously just hate certain things or just shun certain things without really looking at, I mean, the merits,
Yeah.
because it's part of reality. This is what happens
Well, I
even in
think
that
a lot of
society.
the critics are not
Yeah,
people who know much about literature,
it's
right, or about film, and
about
so
films. Yeah,
they're criticizing something that they think looks imitative of Indian films, and they're
yeah.
like, show our own culture. We don't sing and
We
dance
don't
in our
see
culture,
this.
but um, Yeah, I think they're missing what the function of those
Of those. I
singing
mean, it's just like
instruments.
some people would not say, you ask them questions, oh, I don't watch Nollywood, or I don't look Kannywood.
Mm-hmm.
You say, why? Well, because, I mean, this is a huge
Because you
thing.
have
This
an
is
idea
because,
in your head, but it's
exactly,
not good.
that is
Yeah.
not good. And then it's just stuck in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's very positive developments. A lot of things are happening that you can see technically survey, the
Mm-hmm.
storyline is good, the script is good,
Yeah.
and then you're feeling that these can, anywhere compares to, and especially when you think about the budget, how much
Mm-hmm.
was used to produce it. So again, this has been a very wonderful, I mean, longer and better
Thank
than I
you.
even thought.
Thank you.
Um, I really appreciate you.
Yeah,
So again,
definitely.
we will talk again. I don't
Sure,
know
no problem.
when,
No
but
problem.
I
No, I
think this
want to
is really
interview
good.
you now because you
Okay,
have a lot of historical knowledge on
I'll be glad
NTA and
to.
JOS that
I'll be
I
glad to
don't
do
have.
that.
So
So
thank you.
thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Yeah.